Hello dear viewers. Welcome back to our channel. Today, I am bringing you a story that I am sure you will love. Take a seat, fasten your seatbelts, and let's explore the story together right now. A man picked the wrong table on a blind date and never imagined she was a millionaire. But love doesn't care about status. The elegant chandeliers shimmered above, casting a warm glow over the cozy hum of conversation at La Belle Maison, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. Waiters in crisp uniforms glided gracefully between tables, balancing trays laden with sparkling champagne and dishes that looked almost too beautiful to eat. Ryan stood at the entrance, nervously adjusting the cuffs of his slightly oversized navy blazer. His best friend, Ethan, had assured him that this blind date would change everything. But as Ryan scanned the room, filled with patrons draped in designer couture, he couldn't help but feel out of place. With a shaky hand, he smoothed the borrowed tie that sat awkwardly against his collar and clutched a crumpled note. Table 12. Her name is Sophie. Just be yourself, and don't overthink it, it read. Taking a deep breath, Ryan stepped toward the host's stand, his shoes faintly scuffing the marble floor. Reservation for Ryan. Table 12, he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. The host gave a polite nod and gestured toward the far end of the restaurant. At table 12, Sophie sat alone, absent-mindedly swirling her glass of sparkling water. Her simple yet elegant black dress and the neat bun of her hair gave her a timeless grace that caught the attention of everyone nearby. But tonight wasn't about appearances or the world that constantly reminded her of her immense wealth. Tonight was about finding someone real, someone who saw her for the person she truly was. She had even told her assistant to omit all details about her last name or her billionaire status. No mentions of the company, no press clippings, just Sophie. From across the room, Ryan spotted her. His heart sank. She was stunning, completely out of his league. Mustering what courage he had, he walked over, his steps hesitant. "Sophie?" he asked, his voice gentle but uncertain. Sophie looked up, her perfectly shaped eyebrows raising slightly. There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "You're not what I expected," she said, studying him. Ryan froze, his face flushed. This is table 12, right?" Sophie tilted her head, observing him for a moment longer than necessary. There was no arrogance in his expression, no carefully rehearsed charm, just pure sincerity. "Yes, this is table 12, she said finally, her tone soft. Ryan exhaled deeply and sat down, doing his best to hide his trembling hands beneath the table. "I'm really sorry. My friend Ethan set this up, a blind date," he explained nervously. Sophie's lips curved into a slight smile. "A blind date? I see." Ryan chuckled awkwardly. "I hope I'm not a disappointment. I didn't realize I needed to dress for an awards show." Her smile widened. "You're fine. Really." A waiter appeared, offering menus and pouring wine. Ryan fumbled with his glass, nearly knocking it over before steadying it. Sophie watched with quiet amusement. There was no pretense in his clumsiness, no performance, just an honest awkwardness that she found endearing. "So, Ryan," she said, breaking the silence, "tell me about yourself." He shifted nervously. "Oh, nothing exciting. I work at a small bookstore, mostly vintage books. I guess I've always loved stories." Her eyes brightened. "Stories? That's refreshing. Most people I meet only talk about investments and portfolios." Ryan nodded. "I'm sure that stuff matters, but books, they're more human, you know? They teach us things that money can't." Sophie tilted her head thoughtfully. "I couldn't agree more." Encouraged by her response, Ryan smiled. "What about you? What do you do?" Sophie hesitated. She could tell him the truth, that she was the CEO of one of the world's leading luxury brands. But instead, she opted for something closer to the person she wanted to be. I work in philanthropy, she said simply. Helping charities, supporting small businesses, it's fulfilling. Ryan's face lit up. That's incredible. Honestly, I admire people who dedicate their time to giving back. It feels rare these days. Sophie felt a pang in her chest. Rare indeed, she thought. In her world of extravagant wealth, compassion often took a back seat. Their conversation flowed effortlessly as the evening unfolded. Ryan shared his love for classic novels, while Sophie told stories of her travels, carefully leaving out private jets and luxurious resorts. Despite their vastly different worlds, they found common ground in the simple joys of life, and, perhaps, in each other. By the time dessert arrived, Sophie found herself deeply intrigued. Ryan wasn't like the men she usually encountered, those who flaunted wealth or chased status. What struck her most was how Ryan listened. He didn't just nod out of politeness. He truly cared about what she had to say. When the check arrived, Ryan glanced at the bill and felt his stomach tighten. It was far more than he had anticipated. He forced himself to stay calm, trying to play it cool. Sophie noticed his unease and, without drawing attention, discreetly slipped her credit card into the check holder when he wasn't looking. Outside, the crisp night air embraced them as they stood under the glow of the streetlights. "This was really nice," Ryan said, his voice sincere. Sophie nodded, her gaze lingering on his. "It was. Thank you for tonight, Ryan." Ryan hesitated, his heart pounding. I'd really like to see you again, if you'd be interested." Sophie paused, her emotions conflicted. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure if someone liked her for who she was or for the life she had hidden. Finally, she smiled warmly. "I'd like that," she said softly. As Ryan walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just met someone truly special, without knowing just how extraordinary she really was. The following evening, Ryan and Sophie met again. This time, it was at a quaint cafe tucked away from the bustling streets of Manhattan. The atmosphere was cozy, with soft jazz playing in the background and dim lighting creating an intimate ambience. Ryan arrived early, clutching a second-hand book wrapped in brown paper, a vintage edition of Pride and Prejudice he had found at his bookstore. It was a simple yet thoughtful gift he hoped Sophie would appreciate. When she entered, dressed in a cozy cream sweater and jeans, Ryan felt his heartbeat quicken. She looked effortlessly elegant yet approachable. "Ryan," she greeted warmly as she sat across from him. "It's good to see you again." "You too," he replied, sliding the wrapped book toward her with an awkward smile. "I, brought you something. You mentioned liking stories, so this is one of my favorites." Sophie blinked, genuinely touched. "You brought me a book?" Ryan nodded, his cheeks flushing. "Yeah, it's not much, but—" "No, it's perfect," she interrupted, carefully unwrapping the paper. Her fingers traced the worn cover with admiration. "This is incredibly thoughtful, Ryan." "Thank you." As their coffees arrived, the conversation began to flow more naturally. "So," Sophie asked, "you work at a bookstore. How did that come about?" Ryan chuckled softly, stirring his cup. "It's not as glamorous as it sounds. I've always loved books. My mom used to read to me every night when I was a kid, everything from classic novels to fairy tales. When she passed away, books became my escape. They felt safe." Sophie listened intently, her heart aching slightly at the vulnerability in his voice. "I wanted to be a writer once," Ryan continued. "But, well, life happened. I had to drop out of college when my dad got sick. Since then, I've been working to keep things together." Sophie's expression softened. "That must have been so hard." Ryan nodded. "It was, but the bookstore, it feels like home. I've always dreamed of owning my own place someday, a cozy shop where people can lose themselves in stories the way I did." His words were raw, genuine, and so full of heart that Sophie felt a lump rise in her throat. "That's beautiful, Ryan, and I believe you'll get there." Ryan smiled, but there was a hint of sadness behind it. "Maybe one day. For now, I'm just trying to make ends meet." Sophie hesitated, then decided to share her own story, choosing her words carefully. "I work in philanthropy," she said gently, omitting the full truth. "I help manage projects for local charities, education programs, food drives, things like that." Ryan's face lit up with genuine admiration. "That's incredible. You must make a real difference in people's lives," Ryan said, admiration clear in his voice. Sophie shrugged modestly. "I try, but it's not always easy. Sometimes people judge you based on appearances or assumptions rather than who you really are." Ryan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I get that. It's like people see what they want to see. They don't always take the time to understand what's beneath the surface." Their eyes met, and for a moment, it felt as if they were speaking about more than careers or society. The conversation naturally drifted to lighter topics: favorite books, dream destinations, and even funny childhood memories. Ryan made Sophie laugh with a story about being accidentally locked in his bookstore during a storm, while Sophie shared a mishap from her time volunteering at a pet shelter where she mixed up the dogs' feeding schedules. What struck Sophie most was Ryan's sincerity. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was just being himself, kind, humble, and genuine. For Ryan, Sophie felt refreshingly different. She exuded a quiet grace, a warmth that felt so real. She listened, truly listened, without judgment or condescension. As the cafe began to empty, neither seemed ready to leave. Ryan broke the silence first. "Tonight's been really nice." Sophie smiled, resting her chin on her hand. "It really has. Thank you for sharing so much with me, Ryan. It means a lot." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to do this again sometime?" Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She could feel herself growing attached, yet a small part of her worried about what would happen when he learned the truth. Still, she pushed the thought aside and nodded. "I'd love that." As they said goodbye outside, the crisp night air wrapped around them. Ryan watched her walk away, his heart feeling lighter than it had in years. Meanwhile, Sophie held the worn book closer to her chest, wondering if she had finally met someone who could see her for who she truly was. In the weeks that followed, their connection deepened. Ryan and Sophie continued to meet regularly, each encounter bringing them closer together. Their conversations grew more personal, with Ryan opening up about his struggles and Sophie sharing parts of her world, though she carefully guarded the truth about her wealth. They avoided the limelight Sophie was so accustomed to, opting instead for quiet cafes, serene parks, and simple moments. Sophie felt safe with Ryan, seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. And Ryan, who had always doubted whether someone like Sophie could ever be interested in him, found himself falling hard. But with those feelings came a quiet fear he couldn't ignore. One evening, as they sat on a park bench overlooking the city skyline, Ryan finally voiced his concern. "Sophie," he began, nervously tapping his fingers against his knee. She turned to him, her expression gentle. "What is it?" He hesitated, struggling to find the right words. I don't understand why you'd be interested in someone like me. I mean, you're brilliant and kind, and I'm just a guy working in a bookstore, barely making rent." Sophie's heart tightened. She wanted to tell him everything, that his job, his income, none of it mattered to her. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Ryan, you're so much more than your job. You're passionate, thoughtful, and genuine. Honestly, that's rare." Ryan searched her face, looking for any sign of dishonesty, but found none. "Thank you," he whispered, though the doubt still lingered. Sophie, too, wrestled with her fears. She hadn't expected to fall for Ryan. At first, It had been curiosity, the allure of someone who saw her as a person rather than a headline. But now, every moment with him felt so real, so fragile. And yet, she didn't want to let go. The weight of her secret loomed large, and everything came crashing down one rainy afternoon. Ryan had just finished his shift at the bookstore when he decided to stop by their favorite cafe, the one where he and Sophie had shared their first meaningful conversation. The rain tapped gently against the windows as he ordered his usual coffee, waiting for Sophie to arrive for their regular meetup. While waiting, his eyes wandered toward the magazine rack by the counter. That's when he saw it, a glossy lifestyle magazine featuring Sophie's face on the cover. The Billionaire Heiress Changing Philanthropy Forever, Sophie Bennett's Hidden Empire. The headline screamed out at him, and for a moment, Ryan thought it had to be a mistake. But there she was, the same warm smile he had come to know, now paired with a story of staggering wealth, luxury properties, and influence in the business world. His stomach twisted as he flipped through the pages, skimming details about her vast fortune and global empire. This couldn't be real. The Sophie who spoke so passionately about charity had conveniently left out that she was running it all from a palace of privilege. Was everything they had shared a lie? By the time Sophie arrived, Ryan was already seated, the magazine tucked under his arm. His expression was unreadable. "Hey," she greeted warmly, brushing rain from her coat. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was." "Who are you?" The question cut through the air like a blade. Sophie froze, her smile faltering. What do you mean?" she stammered. Ryan pulled the magazine out and placed it on the table between them. "This," he said tightly, "this is you? A billionaire? The same Sophie who said she just works in philanthropy?" Sophie's face went pale. "Ryan, I was going to tell you. I didn't know how." Ryan let out a hollow laugh. "You didn't know how, or you didn't think I was worth telling the truth to?" Tears welled in her eyes. "No, it wasn't like that. I wanted you to see me for who I am, not for my money. I was scared you'd treat me differently." Ryan stared at her, his heart pounding. "So you lied instead? Do you know how humiliating this feels? I told you everything about my life, my struggles, my dreams, and you sat there, knowing you could probably buy the entire block where I work with your pocket change." Sophie's voice cracked. "I never saw you that way, Ryan. I fell for you because of who you are, not because I wanted to deceive you." Ryan shook his head and stood up from the table. "You don't get it, Sophie. You had the choice to hide the truth. I never had that privilege. My entire life has been a struggle. I thought you understood me." She reached for his hand, but he pulled away, pain etched on his face. "I can't do this," he whispered before walking out, leaving Sophie sitting alone, tears streaming down her cheeks. That night, Ryan lay awake in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling. The magazine was still on the kitchen counter, taunting him. A part of him missed her already, the way she listened, the way she made him feel seen. But how could he trust her now? Beneath the anger, a deeper question lingered. Did he push her away because she lied, or because he never felt good enough for her in the first place? The next day, Sophie texted Ryan to meet him at the coffee shop. "We need to talk tonight." When they got there, the tension was evident. The girl was as beautiful as ever, but there was a softness in her eyes tonight, a weakness almost pleading that Ryan had never seen before. "Ryan," she said softly, sliding in across from him. "Thanks for meeting me." Ryan stared into his coffee, not daring to face her right away. The ceramic cup trembled slightly in Ryan's hand. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was low, controlled, but laced with hurt. Sophie exhaled slowly, folding her hands together on the table. "I wanted to. I was going to. But then I got scared." "Scared?" His eyes finally lifted, sharp and accusing. "Of what? That I'd treat you differently? That I'd ask you for money?" Is that who you think I am? No. Sophie's voice cracked. Ryan, please. It wasn't like that. I never saw you as someone who'd take advantage of me. Then why? He pressed, his voice rising. Why lie? You sat there while I told you everything about my life, my struggles, my dreams, while you knew you lived in a world I couldn't even imagine. Sophie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Because I wanted you to see me. Not my money, not my name, just me. Ryan shook his head, his throat tightening. You didn't give me the chance to. You made that decision for me. The cafe felt unbearably quiet, the low murmur of other patrons barely audible over the pounding in Ryan's chest. Sophie's voice trembled. I've spent so long being defined by my wealth, Ryan. People only see me for what I have, not who I am. And for the first time with you, I felt normal. I felt seen. Ryan clenched his jaw, fighting the conflicting emotions swirling inside him. But you didn't trust me enough to be honest. That's the problem, Sophie. I thought we were building something real. But how can it be real when you were holding back the whole time? Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. I'm not angry because you're wealthy, Ryan continued, his voice quieter now but no less pained. I'm angry because you didn't think I could handle the truth, like I wasn't enough for you to be honest with. Sophie's heart ached at his words. She hadn't meant to hurt him. She had only wanted to protect herself. But now she saw how deeply she had wounded him. I never thought you weren't enough, she whispered, leaning forward. Ryan, you're the kindest, most genuine person I've ever met. But I was afraid you'd walk away once you knew the truth. I didn't want to lose you. Ryan shook his head, blinking hard. You've already lost me, Sophie. The words felt like a dagger to her chest. I can't do this, he added, standing up. I can't be with someone who doesn't trust me enough to be honest. No matter how much he stopped himself, the words lodging painfully in his throat. Ryan, her voice broke. Please. But he was already gone. The days that followed were empty for Ryan. The pain didn't fade. It lingered, gnawing at the edges of his mind. His thoughts cycled between anger and longing. He missed her laugh, her thoughtful questions, the way she made him feel truly seen. Or so he had thought. But the nagging voice inside him kept whispering. She never really believed you could handle the truth. For Sophie, the ache was unbearable. She had tried so hard to find something real, someone who would love her for who she was, not for her fortune. And in the process, she had destroyed the very thing she cherished most. Late at night, she often found herself rereading Ryan's old texts, reliving the way he had opened up, shared his dreams so openly with her. And now he was gone. But deep down, she held on to one fragile hope. If Ryan truly loved her, maybe, just maybe, he would find his way back. For now, all she could do was wait. One rainy evening, while closing the store, Ryan found himself drawn to the old, worn journal section. His hand hovered over a leather-bound notebook, its pages untouched yet inviting. He sat at the counter, the store silent except for the gentle patter of rain against the window. Then, almost without thinking, he began to write. Dear Sophie, I've replayed our last conversation so many times that I've lost count. When I found out the truth, I was hurt. Not because you're wealthy, but because I felt like you didn't believe I was strong enough to handle it. I let that pain speak louder than my heart, and for that, I'm sorry. You once said you wanted me to see you for who you really are. The truth is, I always did. I saw your kindness, your patience, the way you listen when I ramble about books no one else cares about. I saw the woman who made me believe in something I thought I had lost. It was never about the money. It was you. And I'm sorry I let my insecurities ruin something so rare. If there's even the smallest chance you can forgive me, I'd like to make things right, not with words, but with actions. Ryan. The next morning, Ryan carefully folded the letter, slipped it into a cream-colored envelope, and addressed it simply, Sophie. He didn't trust a courier for this. This was too personal. After his shift ended, he made his way to Sophie's townhouse. The grand exterior seemed more intimidating than ever, a reminder of the world she belonged to, one he had convinced himself he couldn't be a part of. But this time, he didn't turn away. He slipped the letter under the door, exhaled deeply, and walked back into the rain. Sophie was working in her home office when the soft sound of paper sliding across the hardwood caught her attention. Curious, she set down her pen and approached the door, her heart skipping as she saw the envelope, her name, written in Ryan's handwriting. Hands trembling, she unfolded the letter and began to read. With each word, her chest tightened. The vulnerability, the sincerity, the raw honesty. Tears welled in her eyes. For days, she had told herself it was over, that Ryan had walked away forever. But this letter, it wasn't just an apology. It was love. That evening, Sophie made a decision. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her life anymore. The next morning, as Ryan restocked shelves at the bookstore, he heard the familiar chime of the bell above the door. He turned, and there she was, Sophie. In a simple white sweater and jeans, no designer labels, no pretense. Just her. And in her hand, his letter. For a moment, they simply stood there, both unsure of how to start. Then Sophie spoke, her voice trembling but determined. "I read your letter," she whispered, stepping closer. "And you were right. I was scared of losing you, of being judged, of being seen as just the money. But the truth is, Ryan, none of that ever mattered. When I was with you, it was always you I cared about. Always." Ryan swallowed hard, his heart pounding. "I was scared too," he admitted. "Scared I wasn't enough for you. I let my pride get in the way of what really mattered." She shook her head, her eyes shining. "You were always enough. You still are." Silence stretched between them before Sophie reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small folded document. "What's this?" Ryan asked, taking it hesitantly. Sophie offered a soft smile. "It's a business proposal. I know you've always dreamed of opening your own bookstore. And I'm not giving you this out of pity or guilt. I'm offering to invest in you because I believe in you, Ryan." Ryan blinked, overwhelmed. "Sophie, I can't just take your money. I need to do this on my own." "I know," she replied gently. "That's why it's not a gift. It's a partnership. You make the decisions, you run it. I just want to support the person I believe in." Ryan stared at her, the words sinking in. This wasn't about charity. This was trust. And in that moment, he realized he trusted her too. He reached out, cupping her face gently, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't need the bookstore to know what matters most. It's you, Sophie. It's always been you." Their lips met in a kiss that felt like forgiveness, like hope, like a new beginning. And for the first time, both of them knew this was real. The weeks after their heartfelt reunion were transformative. Though Sophie's offer had been genuine and heartfelt, Ryan made his decision clear. "I can't take your help, Sophie," he had said softly but firmly, holding her hands in his. "Not because I don't trust you, but because I need to prove to myself that I can do this." Sophie hadn't argued. She saw the fire in his eyes, the unwavering determination that made her admire him even more. But that didn't mean she wouldn't support him in other ways. Ryan threw himself into his dream with relentless dedication, balancing his shifts at the old bookstore while saving every penny he could. He took business classes in the evenings, often staying up late to sketch ideas for his future store. Sophie was there every step of the way, offering emotional support, sharing insights from her business experience, and celebrating his small victories without ever overstepping. When Ryan finally found a small, cozy shop tucked on a quiet corner of Brooklyn. It wasn't grand or flashy, but it was his. He spent months renovating it himself, repainting the shelves, restoring old woodwork, and hand-picking every book with care. The grand opening day finally arrived, a crisp autumn morning with golden leaves dancing in the breeze. A handmade wooden sign above the door proudly read, "Whitmore and Company. Books." Ryan stood in the center of the store, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the comforting aroma of old paper. His heart pounded as he watched the first trickle of customers arrive. Friends, neighbors, and even former colleagues who had come to support him. But there was one person he hadn't seen yet, Sophie. Just as he began to wonder if she'd come, the small bell above the door chimed. Sophie entered, wearing a simple blue sweater and jeans, her hair flowing in soft waves. No designer brands, no pretense, just her. And in her hands was a bouquet of white lilies. Ryan's breath caught. She was breathtaking, not because of how she looked, but because she was there, exactly as he had hoped. She approached him, a soft smile playing on her lips. "For the grand opening," she whispered, handing him the flowers. Ryan took them, his hands trembling slightly. "You're here. I wouldn't miss it for anything." As more guests filled the space, Ryan realized he needed to say something. Clearing his throat, he stepped onto a small stool near the counter to get everyone's attention. "Hi, everyone," he began, his voice echoing through the cozy space. "I just wanted to say thank you. This bookstore, this dream, wouldn't be possible without all of you." His eyes briefly met Sophie's, and his heart swelled. "But there's someone here I need to thank more than anyone." The crowd parted slightly as Ryan stepped down and made his way towards Sophie. "This woman," he continued, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "has been my greatest support, not because of what she has, but because of who she is. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She's shown me that love isn't about status or wealth, it's about being seen, truly seen." Sophie's eyes shimmered with tears as Ryan gently took her hands in his. "I love you, Sophie, not for your last name, not for what you have, but for your kindness, your strength, and the way you make me want to be a better man every single day." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd as Ryan's words echoed in the quiet. Sophie, overcome with emotion, whispered, "I love you too, Ryan." The applause was thunderous, but Ryan only heard Sophie's heartbeat as he pulled her into a gentle, lingering kiss. For the first time in his life, Ryan felt whole, not because he had finally achieved his dream, but because he had found someone who made the journey worthwhile. 1 year later, the bookstore had blossomed into a cherished part of the neighborhood. Story times for children, poetry nights, and book club gatherings filled the space with joy and chatter. Sophie had become Ryan's quiet partner in the business, not because he needed her wealth, but because she truly wanted to be a part of every chapter of his journey. One evening, after the last guest had left, Ryan locked the door and turned around to find Sophie carefully arranging a fresh collection of books on the shelves. He approached her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "You know," he murmured, "this feels just right." Sophie leaned into him, smiling. "It does." As they stood together, surrounded by books that told stories of love, hope, and second chances, they both knew theirs was the most beautiful story of all. Ryan and Sophie's story serves as a reminder that love goes beyond wealth and appearances. It's about the deep bond between two souls who draw strength from one another. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and comment with your favorite moments below. For more touching stories that will inspire you, bring tears to your eyes, and remind you of the power of true love, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for being a part of our storytelling community. We'll see you in the next chapter, where love and hope always find their way.